Hey everybody, Alex Newman here with the New American, and you've probably heard of Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, this sustainable development agenda, and it is all coming to a head in a little Northern California county, little at least in terms of population. There is a river that runs through that county, and it is no exaggeration to say that this river is the lifeblood of that community. They depend on it for recreation, for agriculture, for life itself. Well, the sustainability zealots have decided that the dams that make this all possible must come down. And folks, this is coming to a community near you. If they manage to bulldoze over the people of Siskiyou County, they're going to come to your town next, or at least in the not too distant future. With us today to talk about this, we have probably the best person to talk about it. His name is Richard Marshall. He's the head of the Siskiyou County Water Users Association. He's the president there. And I've been to this county. I've spoken there. It's a delightful, wonderful rural community. And Richard, thank you for being with us. Tell us a little bit about what this project would do to your county, and how does this relate to the broader global agenda to kind of deindustrialize society and rewild everything and drive everybody into the cities?
Good morning, Alex, and thank you for having me here today. This is the most important project in the country. And the reason I say that is because this is the largest dam removal project in the history of the world. And the people, the zealots who you referred to earlier, are trying to take these dams out, plan to take them out all at once, allowing 14 million acre feet of water to flow out to the ocean. That's about 52 billion gallons of water. And as you may be well aware, and your audience well aware, we are suffering in this area from wildfires in California, in particular, in Northern California especially. These dams that have been in existence since the 1900s basically have provided a lake setting that's beautiful. They want to remove these dams. This is all about fish. That's at least how they put it. The fact is, it's really not about fish. It's about removing these dams to, quote, let the river flow free. But the salmon have nothing to do with it. It's just a frontispiece for basically putting this area into a position where we no longer have the water that comes from the lakes to use, and that will then lead to the next step in it, which is an Agenda 21 step, which your audience may be familiar with. Agenda 21, you may want to talk to them a little bit about it. But basically, after they've removed the dams, they're now going to claim that they don't have enough water for the fish. There are only two major rivers left, the Scott and the Shasta, that are tributary to the Klamath. And those rivers service our agricultural communities who grow alfalfa, cattle, hay, etc. up here. And when they put a demand on that river water to feed the fish, to protect the fish that they've now removed the dams from, that will then put us in harm's way, as we referred to earlier in your conversation, to accomplish Agenda 21 in this area.
Yeah, it really is quite incredible what's going on there. And actually, last time I was in your county, I talked to some of the experts, and they said, this whole thing with the fish, it's an absolute fraud. One of the other things I want to talk about, Richard, before we get more into the details of this dam project, dam removal project, is the fact that it is as anti-democratic as can be, right? You guys have had some democratic expression there in Siskiyou County, and yet the powers that be are completely ignoring the will of the people. Tell us about it.
Yes, I'd be happy to, or sad to, I guess is a better term in this case. We had an election here in our Siskiyou County during one of the general elections to retain the dams. Roughly 80% of the population voted to keep the dams in place. On our northern border, we have the southern Oregon counties who are also going to be impacted, and they felt the same way. So the local communities basically want to keep the dams in place. All the benefits that come from that, they want to keep. It's a combination of the enviros, and I'm talking about the deep pocket enviros, the George Soros group basically financed by George Soros Group, among others, and the Native Americans at the mouth of the river, some 190 miles away, who joined forces to claim that the salmon are endangered by the fact the dams exist. No, they don't pay any mind to the fact that these salmon were never able, and historically, to go up further north because of the lava flows that blocked the river in the early days. Many thousands of years ago, they weren't going up there. So this is what we find arrayed against us, a government that we're all too familiar with, that is attuned to the leftist side of the agenda here to basically put rural America at risk.
And so walk us through what happens if these dams are removed. What is Siskiyou County going to look like a few years after these dams are taken out, assuming they're able to move forward with this?
Well, assuming they're able to move forward, and believe me, we're doing everything we can to fight against this. The population is against it. We're trying everything we can to deal with the actual issue. That is that salmon never went up in the northern part of the river anyway. There's no reason to remove the dams. And by the way, they're owned by Warren Buffett. We didn't mention that, but Warren Buffett is involved in this process. He had agreed to let the dams go. He got roughly $900 million event taken care of by combination ratepayers for Pacific Corp and the taxpayers of the state, and a largesse that was granted from a Prop 1 fund passed here in California, supposedly for clean water, but instead $250 million blank check given to a third-party group formed out of New York to remove these dams. So this whole thing is an orchestrated event, orchestrated by people basically out of the East Coast, also out here on the West Coast, who are, quote, anti-dam, but they're also anti-rural California and anti-rural Southern Oregon. And these groups have taken hold to remove the dams, again, under this Agenda 21 thesis, to put the rural communities at risk. So it doesn't feel very good when the public that you're connected with says, we like the dams, we want to keep the dams, they have valuable purpose, firefighting, recreation, etc., all good benefits. And then have people out of Washington, D.C. Say, in effect, that we're not interested in what you think. We want to remove the dams because we have a deal that we have to carry out.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And we're going to be going to a break in a couple of minutes. But when we get back on the other side of that, I want to talk some of the specifics of the benefits that these dams have provided, not just for the communities, but incidentally also for the local wildlife, the local flora and fauna. It's really been incredible to see what has developed there. And of course, the salmon scam, just like with so many of these other so-called environmental initiatives, they come up with some excuse like an owl or a tortoise or a salmon or something as a pretext for eliminating ranchers, farmers, and rural communities. And folks, that is one of the many objectives of these UN Sustainable Development Programs. They've made very clear they want to herd people into big cities off of the rural lands where they can be monitored and controlled and tracked and taxed and regulated. It's no understatement to say that we have a war on farmers, especially independent farmers and ranchers. A very good friend of mine happens to be a rancher in Siskiyou County, a cattle rancher, and their property, their business, their livelihood could be devastated by these proposals that are coming. We are with Richard Marshall. He's the president of the Siskiyou County Water Users Association, and we are talking about a sustainable development type project that is in the process of bulldozering this wonderful rural county in California, Siskiyou County. Richard, tell us about the benefits of these dams that they want to remove, that Warren Buffett owns, that he's being paid hundreds of millions of public dollars to do this. Tell what benefits do these dams provide for the citizens of Siskiyou County, for the citizens of Southern Oregon, and also for the local plant and animal life?
Right. We talked a little bit earlier about the issues of fires. As you know, California has had a lot of wildfires, and many of them are of the northern end of the state where we have most of the trees and forests and so on. And these particular lakes or reservoirs behind the dams provide sufficient water for using for fire retardant. As you know, chemical fire retardant has some problems or issues with it. And the water, pure water, doesn't. But the helicopters and so on that can dip into the lakes, it makes it easy for them to work on putting fires out. And indeed, they've saved a lot of lives up there in the Copco Lake vicinity. In addition to that, there are flora and fauna left over from ancient lakes that was originally there where these dams are located, and these dams have essentially recreated the reservoirs behind them, recreated the flora and fauna and the wildlife that existed back at the time of the ancient lake, because some of those were still there at the time the dams were put in place, and they regenerated there. So this will all be lost as part of the dam removal, should it take place. We hope it doesn't. We're doing what we can to prevent that. And what will be left will be a canyon with a river running at the bottom of a canyon. This will be a deep canyon, and the people that have built homes have their life savings invested, many of them, in their homes that look over this beautiful lakefront area, use the lakes for boating. That will all be gone. The animals that depend upon the lakes will also disappear, and that's an entire biosphere environment that's been created around the lakes that will disappear. The animals will also be suffering along the river, downriver, which we haven't talked about. Downriver, there's tremendous impacts too, because the sediment is 20 million cubic yards, roughly, of sediment that will flow out towards the Pacific Ocean over 190 miles or so to the Pacific Ocean from these dams. That sediment, some say it's toxic, some say it isn't, but the fact is the sediment is composed of particles which include toxic chemicals that will pass out into the sea. Everyone agrees, both sides, that the salmon will be wiped out as a result of this removal of the dams, just because of the sediment and so on. What they haven't talked about are the animals that are provided water by the river will also be damaged in this process. And a lot of these are environmentally sensitive areas and also endangered species along the way, like long-nosed sucker, short-nosed sucker. They've developed around these lakes, and they will also be wiped out as a result of this process. What the environmentalists are contending is, well, that's well and good. They'll return. It'll all come back. Don't worry about it. It'll all come back. But we have some examples just north of us, the Condit Dam, the Elwha Dam, that were removed. They're very small dams, actually, and close to the ocean. So they're not comparable to what we're talking about here, but they polluted the rivers such that the salmon still haven't come back in those areas some 2 or 3 years later. Now they're talking about maybe 10 years for the salmon to return. And certainly there are going to be a couple of life cycles of the salmon that will be missed during this process, because they won't be able to lay eggs in the tributaries along the Klamath River. So that's one of the other items. The other thing that will be lost is the shellfish population at the mouth of the Klamath River, because those will be covered up in silt, and that will destroy that shellfish population down there. Maybe it will eventually return, maybe it won't. We don't know. But these are some of the issues. We also have just the sheer beauty. I wish I could show you a picture of Lake Copco. That's the lake that sits behind the two reservoir areas, two dam areas. Those are just gorgeous. The wildlife, fauna, everything, it's just like a very natural setting. It's been there for 100 years. So it's not as though it was yesterday. And the wildlife has adapted to it, and the trees have adapted to it, and so on. All this stuff will be gone. And the people who have their homes that built them with their life savings to be up in a nice lake area, that will be gone as well. In all of these cases, the state of California has done little to provide any kind of protection in terms of funding or taking care of the people that would possibly be damaged. And many of them have already been damaged for many years, 20 years to be exact, because this Damocles sword of the removal of the dams has been hanging over their head this whole time. And many of them, their home values have dropped at least in half as a result of that process. We have the rabid environmentalists running around claiming that the salmon will repopulate the area and so on, go up much further and create another 300 miles or so of habitat. But in fact, if you look back in the history of these dams, this is where corrupt science has entered into the picture. The salmon never went up that far. We had lava reefs. This is volcanic country we're in. There were at least 4 or 5 flows that were sufficient to raise the height or elevation of the area of 350 to 400 feet. And we know that in the particular area where the dams were placed, sort of at the edge of this flow deal, there was a 300-foot high, and still there, you can still see it, lava plateau, in which the dam was placed, and it was placed at a choke point where we're talking about Copco 1 dam, placed at a choke point that the engineer at that time decided to put the dam. It also coincided with a lava reef that kept, or dike, should be called a dike, lava dike that kept the salmon from going further north than that point anyway. But the environmentalists claim that they did go further north, but they're confusing the red band trout, which is a salmonoid, but is a prehistoric one that is very successful in surviving. They're about 35 or 40 pounds, so pretty big fish. And red band trout, you may know, is one of the most sought after fish. Now, but they have an interesting problem for the rest of the salmon. That is, they're carnivorous and they have teeth. Salmon don't have teeth. And the fingerlings for the salmon, which will be now subject to the red band trout coming downriver once the dams are removed, will also be decimated. So we don't see anything good to come from removing the dams, even if Warren Buffett feels there's not enough power generation for his liking there, and he wants to sell power from his Midwest solar and solar power system and wind power systems. He doesn't feel there's room, evidently, for hydropower. As we know, hydropower is the cleanest power you can have, carbon-free, 24/7. In fact, you have to have that kind of power because solar and wind cannot handle the energy requirements of 24/7.
Well, basically, we're using corrupted pseudoscience to destroy the salmon under the guise of saving the salmon, and in the process, destroying homeowners and communities. Pretty incredible. We're almost out of time now. We've only got about a minute left, but tell us real quick, how do people fight back? Where can people find you online? I know you mentioned the Siskiyou County Water Users Association has a Facebook page. Tell us how people can get involved and why they should.
Yeah, people should get involved for a couple of reasons. First, to save this situation, and secondly, because it could be at your doorstep next. If this type of activity is allowed to go against the public will, which is what we're talking about. So if people want to participate, they should look at the Siskiyou County Water Users Facebook page, and we'd be happy they can get information there on how to contribute to helping us in our legal battles. And believe me, if you've ever been in a legal battle, they're very expensive, and we need all the help we can get. We need all the help we can get in this process.
Very good. Folks, that was Richard Marshall, the president of the Siskiyou County Water Users Association. You can find them on Facebook, and if they manage to take down their dams in violation of the people's wishes, it'll be in your community not too long after that. So thank you, folks, for listening, for watching. God bless you all.